Let's do Acolyte.
Bad? bad TV
Pretty
show.
shit. In these 2 episodes.
This is 4 and 5, which feel like they used to be 1 episode. It feels like 2 halves of this.
It sure feels that way. They're definitely shot in the same forest warehouse. So May, the evil twin, has orders from the master, the guy who is probably a Sith Lord. Now confirmed, spoilers, he is.
I have no name. But a Jedi like you might call me Sith.
She's given orders to kill the Wookiee Jedi who initially visited her at the Witch Coven. To kill him without a weapon is the challenge. And she goes in there with like her buddy, Asian Ezra Miller, as he's deemed.
He does look a lot like Ezra Miller somehow.
He sure does. The Jedi track them and eventually do find them. There's a puzzling scene where suddenly May decides to not be a bad guy anymore. Very suddenly.
After running through that forest for an extremely long time, I realized something. You were wrong. Osha being alive changes everything. My loyalty is to Osha.
Yeah, it's like I feel like I was missing something. It was
me too.
Like there was a gas leak in my house and I just woke up and
I'm dizzy.
And suddenly, like, May is in a different state of mind.
Yeah, totally. It was really, really weird. I like wrote it down immediately. I was like, May suddenly loyal to Osha?
Where is this coming from? She just murdered 2 Jedi? Like, what? How is, like, you'd think she'd be in the tank, you know? Like, you need, like, some event, some realization that you could feel for that turn to make sense, but they don't do any of that work.
Nada. So the whole story ends up being who is the guy in the mask. That's the entire story. That's why everybody's watching for like 2 episodes. And everybody assumed it was Asian Ezra Miller because she like set a booby trap for him and she abandoned him. And then they were like, it's got to be him. And I was convinced. And you know what? I'm still convinced.
I think there might be another secret Sith Lord. Yes.
So they revealed it is in fact him. Like the least surprising thing possible. And again, it's like, well, like, why did that need to be a mystery box? Like, why couldn't he have just been the Sith without a mask the whole time? Like, why could, like...
Yeah, he's bumbling Ezra Miller in those scenes, and it's like, oh, it's just a disarming vagrant.
Well, because I don't know this character to begin with. And so why do I give a fuck if he is or isn't a Sith, right? Like,
yeah,
what's that
it's
stake?
very, like, it's very, I don't know, primetime TV, like... the reveal in a Law and Order episode or something where you introduce a bunch of different characters. Like one of these is the villain. Which one is it? You know, Will
Batman and Robin escape the giant clam? Immediately they escape the giant clam. So, okay. No, but my theory continues to be this. I think that behind the scenes, Leslie Headland is laughing and she's going, ha ha ha. They have no idea. They're making fun of my space witches. They're making fun of the fact that it diminishes Anakin and all this. They don't know that I'm going to draw a direct line to the Anakin thing. That this is 100 years before episode 1. So this is going to actually, the dark magic that where you can birth kids with the Force came from the witches and Plagueis somehow. They're going to somehow get this to Plagueis, I think. Somehow.
Is Asian Ezra Miller Plagueis?
I think he could be.
Or is it maybe one of the mothers is alive and she's secretly Plagueis? I don't know.
I think he's Plagueis in the way that one guy in Rings of Power is Sauron.
Another mystery box. One of these guys is Sauron. Who could it be?
You know Sauron. Who is he? It's not a story, you fucknuts.
Yeah, this is, yeah. And like, so they get to Kalnaka, the Chewbacca, and he's already like dead. So it's like you hyped up this guy, and he's like cool and strong.
It's a Wookiee Jedi. It's kind of never seen that before, you know.
And he's already dead, and you're just like, oh. And then then it's revealed then all the Jedi fight Ezra Miller, and they all die to him, and people were like, "Oh, at least the technical fighting was good." And I'm sorry, I just like as soon as like these lightsabers are fighting and I don't care about anybody, like I just zone out. Like any like technical details of the fights, it's gone because I don't care about anything that's happening.
The whole thing looks like Star Wars Kid to me.
Yeah, it like, you know, it seems like a fan filmy type of thing. They're in the woods too. It's so similar.
But yeah, you and I were laughing a little bit. Like it does all hit a little differently if you never liked the prequels to begin with. Yeah, because a lot of the complaints are like, this diminishes Anakin, and we're like, I didn't like that Anakin Jesus stuff to begin with, and or like can you believe that they've contradicted Kiadi Mundi's, you know, a very important line in the Phantom Menace. I'm like, I don't like the Phantom Menace to begin with.
No, this is very compelling.
The dialogue is bad, and you know everybody's standing around. I'm like, that's what I said about the prequels. Yes, but so okay. Here's where we can have a very interesting, a fascinating little discussion. When it comes to shit that people say, one of the things that they like to say is, and Red Letter Media just did this, which I thought was embarrassing. I really like Red Letter Media, but they just put out a video. You know, I've been a huge fan for many, many years. They put out a big, you know, hour-long video, hour and a half, where Rich and Mike, my two favorite personalities on Red Letter Media, I thought it was fine. I thought it was fine. I have my old man notes. I don't know anything about Star Wars.
Drop my notes.
They for like 2/3 of the video, they talked about like the discourse surrounding it, and then they reviewed the episode. And their dissection of the discourse was something along the lines of like, yes, Hollywood is super left. Yes, the creators of this are probably super left. But Hollywood always has been, and they've always commented on their own contemporary stuff. Mike, more than Jay, seemed willing to make firmer statements like subverting the Jedi as bad guys is an example of that kind of new politic. In other words, they didn't say this explicitly, but in other words, it's actually not all gender, sex, and race. Some of it is just being like the good guys or the bad guys, you know, just postmodern type stuff.
Yes.
But they were kind of even-handed and fair and whatever, and you know they had to do the thing where like, so once they diagnosed the problem, they had to also like be like, but Nerdrotic is really an asshole too, you know. And like, okay, I know, but it's like, I don't know. My first priority is like the Disney Corporation is doing something insane, like, and then like a YouTuber doing like responding to it to me is like small potatoes. But then in the final third, they're like, it's not all that political though, even though they just covered the fact that like it is obviously political, and they're like, but not really. And then they said it like it was an okay show.
I don't find the politics in this super intense.
No.
Other than it has a diverse cast.
My experience watching it is, this is highly mediocre.
So I was talking about this in Discord, and somebody was like, well, what did you want them to say? They were kind of offended by me. And I said, all right, I would say they should have said, number one, acknowledge that the show is very badly made, because it's a terrible piece of shit. And
it is. It's bad. It's irredeemably bad. There's no story.
There's no being even-handed about that aspect of it. Like, just call a spade a spade. It's a piece of shit. And you know what? Like, it's not like these guys are incapable of talking about how Star Wars is shitty. So, it's
literally how we got to know them.
Number two, be consistent about if they believe the subversive politics in the show are there or not. And number three, I said go deeper than to say if you don't like it, don't watch it. Because towards the end, Mike was like, I don't understand. Like, just if you don't like it, don't watch it.
If you turn it on and it annoys you or you don't like it, stop watching it. That's the beginning and end of it. If you don't like the content, just pick a different content. If it's unsuccessful and nobody watches it, it goes away.
Yeah.
And then they try something else.
And this is related to this other growingly popular sentiment, again, from people who would prefer that you don't critique the show. I think that's where it stems from, which is, hey, your hate watches, all this hate watching, all this discourse around it, that's just going to make more acolytes. That's just going to force more people to watch. That's just gonna, they make money off of that too. All press is good press. I'm like, no, that sounds good because you're like, wow, there's a lot of people talking about Star Wars. So it must be that equates to dollars. Well, let's get into the numbers.
By the way, I want to reiterate, we like Red Letter Media.
I'm a huge fan.
And actually, when the hour-long discussion before they reviewed the show, I thought it was actually nice to just zoom out for a second. Because, I mean, with all the talking heads back and forth,
Yeah.
It was good to zoom out, and they had a lot of good points. But yes, continue with the numbers.
Fair enough. Well, you know how they always talk, like during the union strike, for instance, everybody was always like, we never know how these shows perform. Well, you have a little bit of data. You have the Nielsen, streaming charts, and you also have now there's a new one that's eclipsed it, Luminate. And there's a little, I take this with a grain of salt, but I found some stuff that indicates that this is true. For their first 2 weeks, the Acolyte averaged per week 4.9 million viewers. Ahsoka averaged 9.9, and Andor averaged 6.89. Okay. So the Acolyte is lower than Andor. Ahsoka is significantly higher.
Yeah, double. Yeah.
Double. Then on the third week,
very interesting.
On the third week, Acolyte declined by 31%.
Wow.
Ahsoka declined by 5.75%.
Lots of retention there.
So people stuck with Ahsoka. Andor, 26% drop. Obi-Wan, 28% drop. So the 28 to 31% drop is pretty typical, it would seem. But not with Ahsoka for some reason. They stuck around. And it leads you to believe like maybe the prequel lovers are like they're like an important part of the demo.
And I think Ahsoka is a popular character. Like when I think about Star Wars merchandise, and like I use my nephew as an example, I go over his house. He's 7 years old. And he loves Star Wars. And I think about the merch he has. It's mostly original trilogy and prequel stuff. And he has an Ahsoka lightsaber. Yep. I don't really see much sequel merchandise. But
so now I think these are the numbers that are very fascinating. So now let's just get into, if you took the whole series, if you took an entire season of TV and you averaged all of the, what are the average weekly viewers for each show? The Mandalorian Season 3, 21.5 million viewers. Double Ahsoka, which is, Ahsoka is 10.4. Obi-Wan is after Mandalorian Season 3 at 15.5. Oh. So Obi-Wan was a big success. Makes sense. It's a recognizable character, star there.
Ewan McGregor.
Vader. Book of Boba Fett was 11. So Boba Fett outperformed Ahsoka. Then Andor at 7.1. And then Acolyte is the lowest performer by far at 5.6. And I remember when they were talking about Andor, like, we can't make a season 2. This is a failure. We spent too much on it.
And this is more of a failure.
Yeah, but don't be telling me that, like, no, the hate watches don't equate. Have we learned nothing from Snakes on a Plane? Remember that old thing where they were like, there's so much internet buzz about Snakes on a Plane. This movie's going to open huge. And it, like, didn't open at all. Like, the internet noise does not equate. Like, you ever talk to it? Walk up to a stranger and be like, "Hey, did you catch the latest Acolyte?" They didn't. They're not watching it.
Yeah, because people on the internet, it's what, Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker. It's like that's two people. It's not a lot.
I mean, they're eating well because their audience goes to them for that critique. But
yeah, they watch them so that they don't have to watch the series. Yes.
But it's interesting that, like, really, The Mandalorian is in a league of its own in the Star Wars shows. So by season 3, you're still at 21 million. And that is not really a prequel dependent Filoni. I mean, Filoni is very much involved in it, but it's not, you know what I mean? It was a new thing. Yes, it has a Boba Fett looking guy. Yes, it has a Yoda, but I feel like it was a really good marriage of, like, Clone Wars, original trilogy. It kind of hits all the quadrants of Star Wars in a way that feels almost obvious. Now, granted, season 3 sucked. Don't get me wrong, but it still pulled in. It's the only one that pulled in, like, Bridgerton, Dahmer, those Stranger Things, those big Netflix numbers. Like Netflix seems to really score big on this stuff, probably just because everybody has Netflix.
Well, that's the thing. I think I was listening to something and it was talking about how young people aren't really watching these Disney Plus shows. So it kind of goes against that thing where they're like, oh, it's because young people are into like these like subversive things. It's like, not really. They watch it on Netflix.
Yeah.
They watch these series on Netflix that are popular, which aren't, I don't think those series are, have lesbian witches. Maybe they do. Well, some of them do, but they're good shows. They're good shows, okay? They're
and to be like, like if you watch The Acolyte, which is bombing compared to all of the rest of their, then you will. And fucking Red Letter Media said this. They're like, just don't watch it. Otherwise, the algorithm, it's going to pick up on the fact that you don't watch it. Then they won't make more shows like this. I'm like, what?
I don't. Maybe your individual app will stop recommended too. But
yeah, yours. Yeah, but right, like this is not a success for them, and so fine. Like the ratings don't justify it in the first place. But even more than that, like anybody with a brain would know that like hate watches and tons of talk about how much the show sucks is not good for the long-term brand. Like obviously somebody managing this brand wouldn't want that.
And it's why there's going to be a Mando and Grogu movie because that's the only thing that has numbers.
It's been really interesting to watch like ordinary people, I feel like, for the first time in what has been 8 years maybe of this sort of content. This sort of like, because I think it really just comes down, it's sort of simple. So there's a lot of people being like, hey, I'm just curious, like, why would Disney do this? Like, why the business decision to make something that obviously no one was going to like? And why do something that doesn't feel faithful to Star Wars in any way? And why have they done this to Star Wars? Like, I feel like only now people are asking. I'm like, you weren't asking during She-Hulk. You weren't asking during Captain Marvel. And I mean, like, they've been doing this over and over and over again.
Yeah, there's something about this show, I think, that is so egregiously wrong, I think, that people have finally been like, yeah, this is, yeah.
Well, it's frustrating as somebody who's been saying it for a while. But I think the problem, if I could diagnose it, is quite simple, which is, as Bob Iger keeps saying, quantity over quality. They had to feed the monster that was Disney Plus. They wanted to do it. They wanted to ensure its success. So they wanted to do it with very popular brands. They ordered a ton of content. And I think when you order a ton of content, then you have a talent drought. And so they probably were hiring like a lot of, like people who came from romantic comedies or people who came from like, they just graduated from college or whatever, like to make these shows.
Yeah.
And
Rick and Morty and stuff like they had.
They're simply not, well, James Gunn though. And the Russos, well, dare I say you lucked out. You chose actual visionaries, maybe accidentally. I don't know, but yeah. So I think it's probably just a talent thing and ordering too much content and not enough talented people. And I think that untalented people tend to not have a lot of personal life experience in the first place. They're not necessarily inspired by stories that are bigger than contemporary politics. I think contemporary politics is just on the mind of like, and they all share a common politic, and
it's probably the easiest thing they can grab from the shelf.
Yeah. And so then the next question is, well, if Bob Iger has expressed he doesn't want it anymore, why does it continue?
I don't know. I think that
I don't think he knows the difference. I think he says don't do it. And then I kept reading this thing that was like all year that was like he's seen clips from the Acolyte and he thinks it looks incredible. I think maybe he's a dipshit that doesn't know what good looks like. And I think Kathleen Kennedy obviously is the same way. I mean, she hasn't been able to put together anything cohesive with this brand.
So it's like a bubble thing where they can't even tell what quality is anymore.
Yeah, like I don't know what these people watch for TV in their like off time. I don't know like what they're, but they don't seem to have good taste. And then they're reflexively they have to defend their talent. So like when they drop a diss track or something, they have to stand behind.
Oh,
it.
that was weird. Well, that's the thing. It's like you can't just insult fans.
Seems like the kind of thing that would get you fired at one time.
You just can't. It's just like even if you think it's like that's just not how you build a brand. It's not.
Like, I remember when James Rolfe was like, I'm talking about the minority of people here, so I'm just talking to like a small group. And like, that doesn't work either.
While most of the fans watching are really awesome and already get it, there's some people who are trying to be counterproductive to the whole thing. Complaints of the asshole-ish variety, which does not represent the majority of you.
That's the other common refrain is like, well, wait a minute, the politics have nothing to do with it. It's just whether or not it's good or bad. It's like, yes, the overall quality of the content is king, but literal contemporary politics in a sci-fi fantasy is probably a recipe for disaster, like right off the bat. And it's a predictor of like where your head is creatively.
Yeah. And I think a story like Star Wars, you just need good guys and bad guys.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about, I think Red Letter Media brought that up when they were talking about like the whole, it just depends on your perspective of who's good or bad. And one of them quoted Anakin where he's like, in my opinion, the Jedi are evil. And I'm like, well, the important line there is Obi-Wan saying, then you are lost.
Yeah.
That's actually I actually was really impressed. I am not a huge prequel guy, but I was very impressed the first time I heard that. I was like, oh, wow. Like, that's putting a stake in the ground. That's going like, then you're wrong. Like the dark side of the Force is not good guys. The Jedi are like, critique the Jedi if you must, but like, they're on the side of truth. They're on the side of justice.
Yeah.
I'm okay with saying it, I thought that was cool.
Like,
that was cool.
It does seem like there's some sort of because the Master Soul, it seems like there's something with his story that's going to reveal he did something bad and naughty, and it's, I don't know. And like, there was so many like Jedi deaths in this episode, this previous episode, and it's like none of them I felt nothing. Like Yord, who cares?
Not Yord.
Like, not Yord.
It reminds me a bit of remember the Geonosis scene in Attack of the Clones where there's like just dumpy Jedi running around a soundstage and like they're dying, all the time.
Yeah. Or what was the Star Wars series where was it Wade or something? Wade dies.
Oh yeah, remember Wade? I remember Wade.
And they're like, oh Wade,
Wade,
Wait! Wait!
And then like, who's Wade? What is this?
Not Wade. Yeah, Obi-Wan was really that's a huge fuck up. Just the fact that show wasn't very good at all. Somebody the other day was like, I never saw Obi-Wan. How could they fuck it up? And I was like, well, imagine if you made an Inquisitor the main character instead of Obi-Wan. And then imagine that you like did a retcon where he had to save baby Princess Leia from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you got to see it for yourself, I think.
It's like,
But I think Obi-Wan is significantly better than the Acolyte, significantly, because there's at least there's some cool, there's one cool Vader fight. There's two Vader fights. One is good. I think everything with Owen was good, Uncle Owen. Some of the Tatooine set design was it was nice to be on Tatooine. It was cool to see like Bail Organa, I suppose.
oh yeah, that his little father-daughter thing was kind of fun.
It wasn't like terribly like you could find stuff to like, but it didn't come together at all. I mean, I really think that the Inquisitor thing was just such a distraction from the story that we're here to hear about.
I like in this series they had to stab X-23 3 times, like stab her, because like usually in series like this they stab people and they don't live. If she's alive after this episode, I'll eat my words. But there was a meme going around where it's like it shows her with the 3 holes in her body, and then she's in the hospital bed, like
She wakes up in the hospital. That's so good.
and then
They should cut to the girlfriend from Godzilla -1 with the eye patch.
Oh.
She was very good in Logan. Logan's a good fucking movie, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And she has like some kind of charisma. There's no like writing or anything, but she does have something in her. She definitely knows how to like fight with a lightsaber if you're into just
that was
dumb
like
spectacle.
That was that year that like Logan, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and like Manchester by the Sea all came out around the same time, and like I had a headache. I was crying so much in the movie theater.
An
Like, this is
embarrassment
too
of
much
riches.
Yeah, it was very good. But all of those like end of movie deaths were just so. Not that doesn't happen in Manchester by the Sea. Manchester by the Sea, you just start. I don't know why. I just started crying at the beginning of the movie. Just, I knew that something wrong was with Casey Affleck. I didn't know why.
Something's wrong with him.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.